Stop crying. I sold it to save the family. You lived here 5 years. Consider the sale price your back rent. That was the first thing my father, Josiah, said to me, as I stared at my life packed into wet garbage bags on the sidewalk. He held up a sheriff's eviction notice like a shield. He bad not just kicked me out. He admitted right there that he had secretly sold the apartment I paid for 30 days ago using a quitclaim deed. He stole $150,000 of my equity to pay my brother's debts. I did not beg him for a key. I pulled out my phone, snapped a photo of him standing there with the notice, and walked away. He thought he broke me. He did not know he just gave me the evidence I needed to destroy him. To understand why I walked away instead of fighting him on the sidewalk, you have to understand the trap he set 5 years ago. It did not look like a cage back then. It looked like a favor. I was 27 years old, working entry-level at the firm, and drowning in student loans. My debt-to-income ratio was a disaster. But I had managed to scrape together enough cash for a down payment on a foreclosed condo in the city. It was a wreck. The walls were covered in black mold, and the floorboards were rotting. But it was the only thing I could afford. I saw a future there. The bank, however, only saw a liability. They denied my mortgage application 3 times. That was when Josiah stepped in. He sat me down at his kitchen table, poured me a cup of coffee, and offered to save the day. He said he would put the deed and the mortgage in his name to secure the prime interest rate. He told me it was just a formality to help his little girl get a start in life. He promised that as soon as my credit score improved, we would refinance and transfer the title to me. I believed him. I believed him because I wanted to believe that my father finally saw me as someone worth helping. I did not know then that he was not signing a mortgage. He was acquiring an asset. For the next 5 years, I paid every single dime. The mortgage, the property taxes, the insurance, the homeowners association fees. I set up a direct transfer to his account every month, and I never missed a payment. Not once. But the money was the easy part. The real investment was the sweat equity. I spent every weekend and every holiday inside those walls. I taught myself how to install drywall, because I could not afford a contractor. I sanded the original hardwood floors on my hands and knees for 3 weeks straight until my knuckles bled and my back seized up. I ate instant noodles for dinner so I could afford high-end stainless steel appliances. I turned that rotting shell into a home. I built $150,000 of equity with my own 2 hands. And the whole time, Josiah watched. He would come over on Sundays, not to visit his daughter, but to inspect his property. He would tap the new granite countertops with his ring, nodding with a cold, calculating satisfaction. He never asked how my job was going. He never asked if I was dating anyone, or if I was happy. He only asked about the market value of the units next door. He asked if I had fixed the leak in the bathroom yet. I realized about 3 years in that he did not look at me like a father looks at a child. He looked at me like a landlord looks at a high-performing tenant. He saw me as a zero-cost property manager who was increasing the value of his portfolio for free. I was an asset class, nothing more. So when he stood there in the rain and told me he had sold it, I was not surprised by the greed. I was only surprised that I had let myself be the golden goose for so long. He thought he had liquidated a smart investment. He forgot that he had also liquidated the only person in the world who would have taken care of him when he got old. I got into my car, shivering, and drove to the cheapest motel I could find. I did not cry. I opened my laptop. I was done being the tenant. It was time to become the auditor. However, to truly grasp why my father sacrificed me, you have to understand who he was trying to save. My brother, Preston, is 35 years old, charming, and completely hollow. He has the kind of smile that gets people to open their wallets, and the kind of luck that ensures those wallets never get filled again. While I was sanding floorboards and working overtime, Preston was chasing fast money. He moved from cryptocurrency scams to high-stakes sports betting, always convinced that he was one big win away from being a millionaire. He never won, but he never really lost either, because Josiah was always there to catch him. Every time Preston crashed, my father was there with a checkbook. He paid off Preston's credit cards 3 times. He bought him a new truck when the old one got repossessed. He blamed the world for Preston's failures. He said Preston was just unlucky, or that the system was rigged against dreamers. But I knew the truth. Preston was an addict, and Josiah was his biggest enabler. I just never thought I would be the collateral damage. The pieces fell into place as I sat on the edge of the motel bed that smelled like stale cigarette smoke. 2 weeks ago, Preston had shown up at Sunday dinner looking pale and shaking. He kept checking his phone every 30 seconds. He didn't eat. I remember seeing Josiah pull him into the study, the door closing with a heavy click. I heard shouting, then silence, then the low murmur of desperate planning. I didn't know the specifics then, but I knew the look of a man who was drowning. Preston had finally dug a hole too deep for Josiah's pension to fill. I found out later that the debt was $100,000. And it was not owed to a bank. It was owed to the kind of people who do not send letters. They send broken bones. Josiah did not have $100,000 in liquid cash. He was retired. His savings were thin. But he did have one significant asset. He had a condo in the city with $150,000 of equity sitting in it. My condo. The realization hit me harder than the eviction. Josiah did not sell my home because he hated me. That would have been easier to accept. He sold my home because he loved Preston more. He looked at my safety, my hard work, and my stability, and he decided it was a fair price to pay for Preston's freedom. He liquidated my life to cover a gambling debt. He threw me into the street to keep Preston's legs intact. I stopped crying. The tears felt useless, a waste of hydration in a war zone. I looked around the cheap motel room. The carpet was sticky, and the neon sign outside buzzed with an irritating hum. But it was quiet. I wiped my face and opened my laptop. My father thought he was dealing with a heartbroken daughter. He forgot that for the last 5 years, I have worked as a senior risk analyst for a major insurance firm. My entire career is built on spotting fraud. I spend 40 hours a week analyzing patterns, tracking discrepancies, and finding the lies people tell to get money they do not deserve. I know how to follow a paper trail. I know that greedy men, especially desperate ones, always make mistakes because they think they are smarter than the system. Josiah thought he had committed the perfect crime because his name was on the deed. He thought he was untouchable. He was about to learn that there is a big difference between holding a title and getting away with theft. I cracked my knuckles and logged into the public records database. I was not a daughter anymore. I was an auditor, and I was about to conduct the most thorough investigation of his life. I sat in that motel room for 2 days. The air conditioner rattled like a dying engine, and the coffee tasted like battery acid. But I did not care. I was in my element. I pulled the property records from the county database within 10 minutes. Josiah had sold the apartment to a corporate flipper called Quick Cash Homes, LLC for exactly $150,000. The wire transfer had cleared yesterday. I checked the timestamp. He had the money sitting in his account right now. But here was the interesting part. He had not paid Preston's debt yet. I knew this because Preston was still posting frantic updates on his private social media, looking for a way out of town. Josiah was stalling. He was probably trying to negotiate with the loan sharks, trying to pay them $80,000 instead of $100,000 so he could pocket the difference. Even when his son's life was on the line, Josiah could not stop being greedy. He was trying to skim a profit off my homelessness. I was about to close the laptop when I saw a notification in my personal email. It was from a private genetics lab in Arizona. The subject line was simply, "Results ready." 3 months ago, during one of those Sunday dinners where I felt more like a servant than a daughter, I had done something impulsive. I had gone into the upstairs bathroom, taken Josiah's hairbrush, and pulled a clump of gray hair from the bristles. I put it in a plastic bag along with a cheek swab from myself. I did not do it because I suspected an affair. I did it because I had spent 32 years looking at him and feeling absolutely no connection. We did not look alike. We did not think alike. I wanted to know if my isolation was biological. I clicked the link. The PDF loaded slowly on the motel Wi-Fi. I scrolled past the technical jargon to the summary at the bottom. Probability of paternity, 0%. I stared at the screen. The room went silent. I expected to feel heartbroken. I expected to feel like an orphan. Instead, I felt the heaviest weight lift off my chest. I felt invincible. He was not my father. The man who sold my home. The man who called me a burden. The man who demanded my loyalty because we shared blood. He was a stranger. The family obligation defense was dead. I did not owe him respect. I did not owe him mercy. I owed him nothing. This piece of paper was not just closure, it was leverage. But I knew I could not just wave it in his face. If I confronted him now, he would just laugh. He still had the money. He still had the legal right to the house sale. I needed to get that money back. And to do that, I had to stop thinking like a victim and start thinking like a predator. Here is the thing about greedy men like Josiah. They have a fatal blind spot. They believe they are the smartest person in the room. They assume everyone else is a sheep waiting to be sheared. They are so focused on taking what they can get, that they never look down to see the trap at their feet. If I tried to sue him for the house, I would lose. He owned the deed. The law was on his side. But if I approached him with a way to cheat the system, if I offered him a loophole that would let him keep even more money, he would hand me the knife to cut his throat. I looked at the sale figures again. Since the condo was an investment property and not his primary residence, Josiah was looking at a massive tax bill. The IRS was going to take nearly 30% of that sale in capital gains taxes. That was roughly $45,000 he would have to pay the government next April. I knew Josiah. He hated taxes more than he loved his children. That was my way in. I opened a new document and began to draft the contract that would ruin him. I waited 2 days to make the call. I needed Josiah to sweat. I needed him to stare at that bank balance and do the math himself. He had $150,000 from the sale, but he knew the IRS was coming for their cut. Capital gains tax on an investment property is brutal. After federal and state taxes, he would be lucky to clear $105,000. Preston's debt was exactly $100,000. That meant after destroying my life and selling my home, Josiah would be left with almost nothing. $5,000. That was his profit margin for betrayal. I knew he was sitting in his trailer, doing these same calculations, furious that his big payday was evaporating to pay off a bookie. That desperation was my leverage. I dialed his number at 9 in the morning. He answered on the second ring, his voice guarded. "What do you want?" "I told you. The house is gone. There is nothing to discuss." "I know, Dad," I said, forcing my voice to crack just enough to sound defeated. "I'm not calling to fight. I'm calling because I can't let Preston get hurt. I know who he owes money to. Those people don't file lawsuits. They break kneecaps." There was a silence on the line. I had him. I took a breath and pitched the lie I had rehearsed for 48 hours. "Look, you won. You sold the apartment. But if you pay the taxes on that sale, you are going to be broke. You won't have enough to save Preston and keep anything for yourself. So, I have a proposal." "I'm listening," he grunted. "I have $40,000 in my savings account," I lied. "I am willing to give it to Preston to help close the gap. That way, you don't have to drain everything you just made. You would do that?" His tone shifted instantly from hostility to greed. "Yes. But I can't just hand him a check for 40 grand. The IRS will flag it as a gift, and I will get hit with a 40% gift tax. I can't afford that. We need to structure it legally." "Structure it how?" "We sign a document stating that the proceeds from the house sale were actually a loan repayment to me. It is called a tax shield affidavit. If we frame it right, the IRS views the house money as debt settlement, not income. You pay 0 taxes on the sale. I give Preston the $40,000 tax-free. Everybody wins." It was nonsense. Legal gibberish mixed with financial buzzwords. But to a greedy man, it sounded like music. He didn't hear a trap. He heard a way to cheat the government and get an extra $40,000 out of me. Finally, using that expensive degree for the family, he scoffed, the arrogance seeping back into his voice. "All right. When do we do this?" "Today. 2 o'clock. I booked a private notary downtown. Her name is Mrs. Gable. She is strict, so bring your ID and tell Preston to keep his mouth shut." We sign the papers. I hand over the cashier's check, and we go our separate ways. "Done," he said. He sounded triumphant. He sounded like he had just pulled off the heist of the century. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the black screen of my phone. He thought I was desperate to buy my way back into his good graces. He thought I was still the daughter who craved his approval. He didn't realize he had just agreed to walk into a room and sign a confession that would cost him everything. I put on my best business suit, grabbed the folder containing the document and the DNA test, and headed out the door. The trap was set. All he had to do was walk into it. The notary's office was a cramped, windowless basement room that smelled of stale coffee and furniture polish. Mrs. Gable, a strict, by-the-book notary in her 60s, sat behind the desk. I had hired her for that reason alone. Across from me sat Josiah and Preston. Preston looked wrecked ashen, sweating, his leg bouncing nonstop as he checked his watch and the door. "Just sign it, Dad," Preston hissed. "They're coming at 5. Josiah ignored him. He skimmed the document I had prepared, affidavit of debt acknowledgement and repayment schedule, never reading the fine print. He only noticed the highlighted words tax exemption and smiled. "I knew you'd come around," he said, clicking his pen. "Family helps family." I rested my hand on the envelope with the cashier's check. The bait. "Sign the papers," I said. "Mrs. Gable is waiting." She asked if he understood the document. Josiah laughed it off, claiming it was just paperwork to keep the tax authorities away. He signed confidently. Preston signed as witness, his hand shaking. Mrs. Gable stamped the page, thud, final and official. Josiah reached for the envelope. "All right. Give it here." I didn't move. "You don't get the check," I said. I slid the money back into my bag and pushed a thin white envelope across the table. "Open it." Inside was the DNA report. Josiah's face drained as he read it. 0%, I said. "You're not my father," he stammered, calling it a mistake. "It's science," I replied. "And what you just signed wasn't a tax shield. It was a confession of judgment. Preston froze. I explained calmly. Josiah had legally admitted he owed me $150,000. No trial required. Default meant immediate asset seizure. Josiah lunged for the logbook. Mrs. Gable slammed it shut. Attempting to destroy a notarized record is a felony. Sit down. I photographed the stamped document and sent it. My attorney just docketed the judgment, I said. The lien is live. Your accounts will freeze tonight. Josiah whispered that Preston would be killed without the money. You stole from me to save your legacy, I said. Look at him. He's already running. Preston bolted for the door. Legacy isn't blood, I said to Josiah. It's character. You just built your own prison. Moments later, Preston screamed. His joint account showed frozen. He stormed out without looking back. Josiah slumped, broken. I'll sue you, he muttered. You sold my home to cover a gambling debt, I said. I just collected. I left without looking back. Outside, the rain had stopped. I blocked their numbers before reaching my car. Within a day, the lien drained Josiah's accounts. 6 months later, he lost his house. He had gambled everything on the belief I'd save him. I didn't. I used the recovered money to buy a smaller place, nothing fancy. But the deed had one name on it. Mine. Yesterday, I installed a new deadbolt. When it clicked shut, I knew it was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. A door that only opens when I say so.